All right, good afternoon, everybody. I see most of you have signed in to the chat. If you haven't done so, please do so at this time. Well, welcome. And I was looking at the calendar. It's hard to believe that we are actually halfway home. All right, for your assignment this week, you had an essay assignment um, relative to the purpose of differentiating content, uh, process, and the like. So first of all, it does appear that we are growing in our depth and in our understanding of differentiated instruction. And we're coming to more of an understanding. I heard a lot of comments relative about grouping like students together, grouping um, different levels of students together, the understanding that um, differentiated instruction is not 20 lesson plans for 20 different students. So we're well on our way on our journey. Glad to see Joe here. Joe, you survived another week. I think the rest of the class might have been worried about you after last week. Um, but we're here. So reference the slideshow here. Froze for a minute. I apologize. So relative to uh, grouping and flexible grouping and its purpose, I think sometimes we make it harder for ourselves than what it has to be. And particularly this third bullet, while homogeneous groups are helpful when teaching a targeted skill. So let's go back to, we've done our lesson, right? We're reaching that 85%. You know, the homogeneous group really is a good way to differentiate on those who are experiencing a difficulty with the same concept or with a particular skill. But what we don't want to do is, let's say we're working on cooperative engagement, which would be an instructional style, right? We're having students work together. We don't necessarily want to homogeneously group that type of work. in addition to what it says here about having negative effects on the students, you know the students are going to pick out the blue birds and the red birds and the high flyers and the lower students, and etc. So when it comes just to our normal groups and our normal instruction, we would prefer that those be heterogeneously grouped. But when it comes to grouping for differentiation, particularly if we are doing our work after we've delivered first time instruction, and now we're looking to have all students work on A, and then we're going to pull some students at different times in that group to work on B. There's a time and a place for that. Okay. So previously we constructed a lesson plan, and we did work on differentiation within the lesson plan. We've also looked at utilizing the case manager. If you look at this, we're trying to go in a progression, okay? So the first thing that we're trying to do is get to know who our students are. And a great way to do that is, one, we've got to take time, particularly with our students with individual disabilities, is we have to become familiar with the parts of the IEP. And we have to become familiar, particularly in my mind, with the specifically designed instruction. What are those students needing to know? And so then the next progression then is, well, if this is what the IEP says, how is that reflected in our instruction? Obviously with the lesson plan. Then within that lesson plan, I think you need to think about, well, what happens if it's an appropriate lesson plan, a well-designed lesson plan, and the instruction is executed effectively. Again, as we've said previously, we're going to do pretty well. We're going to do pretty well. But as we become, and I heard some of you talk about, well, this is my second year, or this is my third year. So you're probably getting to the point where in your curriculum, you can begin to predict. Anybody who's in their second, completed 2 years of teaching, possibly going into their third, care to share relative to that journey where instead of every day is day one, I'm beginning to be able to predict?
Could you repeat that
I'm
question?
sorry, maybe it was poorly phrased. Go, so if you're not a first year teacher, if you have 2 years in, or possibly going into your second year or going into your third year, that year one, every day is day one. With experience, not only with teaching, but experience with our curriculum, you come to know perhaps which parts of your curriculum are more rigorous, where are the typical stumbling blocks.
Yeah,
Your first year, you're not going to be able to do that.
yeah.
So anyone care to comment on their journey from everything's a surprise to being able to do a little bit of prediction of where students might struggle?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what I found that over my first 2 years, I had a chance to build, not only build tools in my curriculum, but tweak them. Like for instance, when I first in my first year, I would just grab videos and use them as a means of differentiation. And now I can find ones that are more condensed, and I don't have to rush it into things. I don't have to scramble to put together a differentiated lesson. And like you did say, the little aspects of each lesson that I find that is more complex, I'm able to break it down a little more. And like for instance, for me, I teach carpentry, rafters and stairs. I'm on a mission to crack the code for rafters and stairs, and I'm doing it with For instance, for the rafters, I built this like rafter lesson module, and I'm doing it with bright colors. I'm making plywood triangles for all the pitches and breaking down the Pythagorean theorem. And I'm going to get them. My goal is to get them to the point where they're doing the math and don't realize they're doing it, where it just comes natural. And I had a lesson today. I'm working my way there with converting decimals to fractions, fractions to decimals. And I mean, I have this autistic support kid who did every bit of the work. And yeah, so today was an awesome day teaching.
Good for you, John. You know, and you bring up an interesting point again, Pythagorean theorem. So we can all reference geometry, right? That's pretty basic geometrical um, concept. Um, but now we're getting them to apply it and have some real value. And you know, they're not going to be able to be successful in construction and carpentry unless things like the Pythagorean theorem specifically, particularly when talking about either rafters or stairs, the run versus the rise. You know, so we know the stairs have to go up at an angle, but how are we figuring the height and the length in order to calculate the hypotenuse, and then cutting the steps in? So you know they can easily be intimidated when you start putting it in those terms, and they'll say, "What is the hypotenuse?" Um, but you're making it real, you're making it tangible, but you've identified that that's going to be a struggle piece, so you're anticipating and have a strategy to help them through that struggle. Others, year one versus year two, the ability to predict. Go ahead, Allie.
So I teach medical terminology for my students, and I kind of just went through the motions and kind of just threw all the information out at them last year and expected them to like memorize the terms. Um, but this year I'm breaking it down a lot more and taking the time to really understand like the fundamentals behind why, what goes into medical terminology. And I feel like right out the gate, the understanding of the prefixes and the root words and the suffixes for medical terminology is it's better received now because I'm actually taking the time. I'm breaking terms down on the board while I'm lecturing and asking them to help me break each word down. So we're doing things in real time rather than me just giving them the information and expecting them to memorize terms. Like I'm actually taking the time to really try and instill the fundamentals of medical terminology in them before we learn new terms. So I feel like that in itself is so much better for me this year, um, that I'm able to actually do that for them, and their grasping of the information is a lot better this year.
Have you come across or ever heard the term regarding word walls? So, word walls are sometimes um, a strategy uh, closely associated with ELA, English Language Arts, but and it deals obviously with vocabulary. Ironically, though, our most intensive vocabulary as far as core subjects would be math. And think about your own specific trade vocabulary. That's all new to them. Um, Perhaps Allie's kids need to take a half an hour day of Latin. Uh, but just quickly, um, one of the things in another life when I was a principal um, is we would have word walls, maybe 50 in our ELA classrooms in middle school, like Allie, the words you can't live without in medical terminology, right? And then it's amazing too. Somewhere along the lines, I don't know where it happened, but we haven't done a good job in traditional schools teaching the point of prefixes and suffixes and separating them from the root word. So if I have a root word and I add a prefix to it, like pre, right? I'm taking that word and all of a sudden now we're referencing before, right? Pre-op, post-op. All right, let's do a little 101 there. Okay, what needs done for a patient before surgery, what needs done after. I mean, certainly I don't want a nurse performing post-op when I'm in pre-op. I know I'm oversimplifying there, but one thing I would encourage you to do, any of you, because we all have vocabulary, and I briefly looked up a definition that I think we could use there. So if you have, and even your word, and I'm going to separate it from vocabulary in a minute. And why I want to call it a word wall is if you have your 50 words, or let's say within your unit of study, whatever you're doing right now, maybe you have 10 really key words that you want to focus on. A word wall is more than a spelling test. A word wall is more than defining. You got to start there, because if they can't spell it correctly, then they're not going to say it correctly. So do they need to know how it's spelled? They do. Do they need to know the definition? They do. But they need to know the use. So expanding your vocabulary, not only having those students properly see it and read it to you. If they can see it and read it, then they should be able to understand its meaning, but then also, then they need to apply it. So just like John wants them to apply the Pythagorean theorem, how are they going to apply their new vocabulary into your instruction? Well, based upon your instruction and based upon your assignments, then they will have to use the new vocabulary. So if you're coming across words that they're struggling with and meaning, I would Google word walls, and you can find images of word walls. Obviously, you can find short videos on YouTube of how to use word walls, and then obviously you can find some definition of what those word walls mean. But the key with the word wall, Derek, I'll get to you in a minute. I think John had a question too. The key with the word wall is it's high frequency, right? And it's content specific. High frequency, content specific. John, did you raise your hand earlier? Did you have something to add? You're muted, John. There you
Sorry
go.
about that. Yeah, so I was just going to speak on word walls, and that's imperative. That's another area where I've grown since year one. Year one, I would just throw information at them. Now, my method is I get to school early. I don't like to stay late. I get there early. I made a whole wall whiteboard. I did the whiteboard coding, so I have a whole wall in my classroom that is whiteboard, and I get in and I write. I basically outline my whole lesson, vocabulary. I outline it the way I want to teach it, and once I started doing that, it became easier and easier to plan my whole day relative to vocabulary and sequence the way I'm going to teach. And it's working out for me. The job's getting a lot easier.
I would also go and use those walls then. And how are those students going to demonstrate what they know? By coming up and demonstrating on those walls, right? So they can, there could be some student demonstration there as well.
Mhm. Yep.
Derek. Go ahead, Derek. You had a question, comment, concern? Oh, your mic isn't working. All right. Sometimes if you log out and log back in, but I don't know. Otherwise, if you want to write your question or comment in the chat, we'll be happy to address that as well. Anybody else before we move on have any other vocabulary or word wall strategies that they have found that's taken their students beyond a spelling test or a list or defined to actual use of the words? All right, I hope you find those word walls helpful. I want to talk about the assignment that was submitted and what's coming up. Somebody sent me an email. There was a discrepancy in the description between the syllabus and the assignments. I did some modifications from the last time I taught this course to now, and it translated into the syllabus. But if you click on assignment, it looked like Module 4 and Module 5 were the same. What you're going to be coming up on is we've been talking about what differentiated instruction means to you. We started out with perhaps what it is not and some common misconceptions. And we have evolved to what we think it is, and also we have provided some examples. We've provided some examples within our own teaching. But then how does that play into the expectations relative to leadership? So if you have looked ahead a little bit, I want to preview a little bit what you're going to do when you talk to your administrator. Has anybody previewed that assignment yet? Taking a look at that, know what I'm talking about? Derek, your mic is working now. Good. So what was your question, comment, concern? All right. So in upcoming here, what you're going to do is you're going to meet with your administrator. It should be coming up on screen here momentarily. And I've provided some questions for you to explore with your administrator. So the first thing is, we've been talking about what it means to us. What does it mean to them? So when you say differentiated instruction to your boss, what does it mean? As an administrator, what are your expectations insofar as differentiating instruction to meet the needs of every student? Has anyone been part of any PD relative to your schools? And have they given any type of prelude where you might have an expectation about those first two questions? Any predictions on what you think differentiated instruction means to your immediate supervisor, your principal? I'm curious to see after you go through that, what is their answer? What does it mean to them? And I think number two is even more important. As the instructional leader, what is their expectation for you? How do you support administrative expectations with corresponding professional development? So whatever they expect of you, and I'm sure you went over whatever on your opening day activities, how is then that supported by professional development? How do we balance the demands of a program of study with learners coming to us with variability levels and preparedness? So not only are these students coming with different backgrounds as far as their abilities, but many of you have level 1, 2s, and 3s all in the same period, creating a challenge. What are the administrative expectations in regards to meeting the specially designed instruction of an IEP, and how do you orient new teachers to the world of special education? So I was reading one work this afternoon, and the teacher was very concerned relative, are we setting students up for failure in the world of work by giving them so many accommodations here at school? And I think it's a valid concern. How about it, any of your cases, are you dealing with a situation where you think the IEP goes too far and perhaps it might be doing a disservice? Oh, and Heather, and the hands go up. Let's go with Merle and Heather. Go ahead, Merle. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. So this is my first year with this experience, but I have a behavior, I forget how it's worded.
A positive behavior support plan.
Positive, yes, yes. And as it's worded out, it is in my mind, I mean, just coddling at its finest, really. With the way that it goes through it, it's like, with the controlled ignoring, there's only positive reinforcement. Like with the controlled ignoring, as long as it was kind of vague. And when I asked the case manager about it, the answer was even vague because they were like, just worry about that if you have to worry about that kind of thing. And being fresh to it, I mean, it was like I can't give any negative feedback to this student.
Well, life's going to give this student some negative feedback.
Right, and that's exactly, like, you can't have a paper skin with any of this. But if you go in the construction field, they're going to tear you apart. And I feel like it's my duty to prepare these students. And with this, especially this behavior plan, it's just outlined like with specific like restrictions as far as instruction that I don't I don't agree with, because it's not setting them up for a successful life outside of that.
This is what we're getting. Hands are coming up now. So this is what I'm going to address Merle first. This is what I would do if I were you. You're aware of the expectations of industry. you now have had this child. Is this a level 1 student, level 2?
Level 1.
Level 1. So you're just getting to know this student, but I'm sure you have some idea of their abilities. Here's my concern. Sometimes, with the best of intentions, we do the worst of things. With the best of intentions, we do the worst of things. I don't know your situation in particular, but I think as a professional, if you engage in dialogue with other professionals, you ought to reach a positive result. That's my hope. Um,
Right.
I think that relative to, uh, I think that relative to um, your expectations in the world of work, you know, you're not saying you're not saying something because you don't want the child to succeed. You're saying something because you do want the child to succeed. So if I were you, I would have a conversation with the case manager, but I would definitely know what I want to say. And I also don't think it's inappropriate to email those concerns in terms of documentation. Here's the accommodation. Here's my concern. This is why. And something else, Merle, is sometimes people are long on the problem and short on the solution. If you have some potential solutions, I think it's worth engaging in conversation. So that's my recommendation to you. I'm going to go to Heather next. I think Scarnetta had her hand up and Nina. Heather.
Yeah, I was just gonna share. I've had a student now for 2 years who's in their junior year. And I'm always surprised by the IEP just because it says that they can retake a test if it's below a 70% that they score, but they're also allowed to use open notes on all tests. Um, and they also get extension on all their missed work. And so, we talk with the parents and everything, but the parent is one of those ones where you respond to an email and then they show up at the school, even if you set up a meeting for the next day to kind of talk about things. And it goes to the highest person in the school if there's any negative comments on the file.
So let me say this, and I have said this to the special ed teachers that I deal with, and I have said this to different LEAs within the county. We need to expect more of special education students than intaking oxygen and giving off carbon dioxide. And I don't say that because I don't care, I say it because I do. When they go out to the world of work post graduation, the world does not have an IEP. So part of what we need to do, and over 14 of years of age, this needs to be part of their IEP, is called transition and transition services. So, for example, and you may never move this high maintenance parent, and I can kind of see what the school's doing. Like, we need to shut her up. We don't want to end up in due process. This is what do it. Because and I've had some cases where, you know, ultimately on the day of graduation, they being the parent and the child have created a situation where that child is not going to be successful outside of the cocoon. So um, I'm going to give you similar advice to Merle in that you're a professional and you care about this student and you care about this student's success, and you're not above giving students every accommodation that they need. They don't need everything that they want, every accommodation that they need. And here's why you think there's a fallacy in retaking a test 70% or lower. So, like, for example, if they get lower than a 70% for the missing 30%, and it's open, I mean, how the hell aren't you getting 100 on everything? And um, and you are skewing achievement. By doing so, you are not getting an accurate record of student achievement, and therefore you are not well informed to use that summative assessment for a formative purpose to drive future instruction. So, I and I don't know if you'll get anywhere. I don't know if you won't get anywhere, but I believe as a teacher, you have almost an obligation really to think what you think is best for the student, and then you need to articulate that concern to the case manager and go from there. In the end, parents have the right to make a bad decision. Nina,
So I wanted to discuss, like, this is actually happening now. I have a student who she really is struggling. Like, she missed the first like 3 days of school. She has every single accommodation that you could possibly think of. Um and there's a history with the student. Like, I was an IA before I have my role now. So I've dealt with her since her first year. And I had reached out to one of my administrators and told them my concern. She ended up skipping school and leaving the building, and it was a whole ordeal. But um, I asked them about setting up a behavioral plan, and getting this kid on a roll because, like you said, like, in the outside world, there is no IP. Like, for cosmetology, we have a state board exam that we have to take. And it's not that they won't give accommodation, it's very hard to get accommodated. Like, you have to get paperwork from a psychiatrist and all these things. And we're only in our third week now, and I'm already like concerned that this kid's not going to make it. And I don't know what else to do. I've reached out, and he was like, "Oh, well, we'll see what we can do." And it's like, well, are we going to wait until his child fails and then decide to put a behavioral plan in? Like, what do you do in a situation like that? Like, I our special ed right now is a little bit all over the place, because we have my special ed who's normally with her. She's subbing for another classroom, so now we have another person coming in to help her, which she's amazing. But what do you do when you don't feel like you have that support from the admin, and you know that the kid is, like, you're giving all the accommodations, they're still not doing what they need to do. I even did a check-in list with her, so now every day that she comes in, I'm like, you tried these three coping mechanisms before we're leaving the classroom. And I have a rule, like, once you're out the classroom for more than 15 minutes, you're not getting hours because you're missing instruction time. So I'm like really torn between what I do now because, like I said, I document everything, um, and we're still not making progress.
so let's talk about the multiple entities that you have to answer to. I'm going to start with the state board. Pretty clear at the state board, 1,250 hours, period.
Hmm.
And you cannot fraudulently award those hours. You're putting your own license at stake
Right.
when you do that. So as far as that child being out of the classroom and losing hours, you're on it.
Hmm.
So if you feel that, I forget what you said about special ed, but let's say it's jumbled. Have you
Yeah, it got a little mixed up this year. One
have
of
you
our normal special ed is subbing right now, so we
have,
have a substitute for her.
have you reached out to the parent?
I have, and I have called, and I have gotten no response.
I, is there also a good email in the student's profile?
Yep, I sent an email. The counselor has sent an email. Admin has sent an email. Then I called to just let the parent know that she was doing better because I believe in, like, if they're doing good, it shouldn't always be bad phone calls. And I still haven't received anything. So I feel like I'm not getting support from either. So I'm like, now I'm stuck. And as soon as we're done doing what we need to do and we have to start doing skills, she's like, I have to go see this person or I need to go see that person. I'm like, well, you can't go see her. She's teaching a class. So I'm always like, go to guidance, because
So I
I'm
would
like
tell
kind of
her no.
stuck.
Let's start by telling her no. You're staying here. If someone outside of here needs you, then they can call for you.
Right.
Um, if she leaves class without permission, uh, if she leaves class without permission, then write her up because
Which I did. And
that's
I
what
do.
right.
But then it's like, oh, well, we'll give her a half day of SIC. And I'm like, no, you're going to give her a full day because what is that? Like, it's the first week and I have to set this expectation. I know I'm a lot stricter than the other, because that's another thing. I'm one of three teachers. I am a lot stricter because you're in your third year. I explain to her, you can't leave in the middle of you having a client and say, I need a 10-minute break because I'm overwhelmed. You got bleach on her hair. 10 minutes, her hair might break off. So I always try to refer it back to industry.
Yes.
Um, but there's always like, oh, well, if she needs in her accommodation, she's allowed to take a 10-minute break. I said, well, the 10-minute break, after that extra five
But
minutes,
it
she's losing
doesn't say
hours. So
when.
she's hurting herself.
But it doesn't say when, Nina. So what I would
Yeah.
say is, here's the appropriate task, and you can have your break per your IEP once you accomplish that task. I wouldn't give up. I would on your end. You've always got to satisfy your own professional conscience.
Mm-hmm.
So I would maintain communication with the case manager relative to inappropriate behaviors. First of all, I'd make sure that I am exhausting my classroom authority and classroom routines. If I need to get involved with the principal, um, I would first let them know that, hey, I'm just not shipping this to you. I've done A, B, and C, and it still is a chronic behavior. And you can't
Mm-hmm.
give up on the parent. Just because they aren't responding doesn't mean I'm not going to respond. I
Right.
will continue to call you. I will continue to email you because I care enough about your child to do so. I'm not saying. I just think you got to control you. You can't control much else. You can control you. Let's control the controllables. Let's be consistent each and every day, and that's the best thing that we can do. Hopefully, the student sees it. If not, these examples here are what I call the weaponization of the IEP, right?
Yes.
In the short term, the IEP has been weaponized, and there's not much we can do. But the day after graduation, there's no weaponization. Brittany, you had something to say.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I feel like mine's kind of on the same page. Not behavior, it's more just brain, I guess, like intelligence in general. So we have doggy daycare. And in order for kids to be in doggy daycare, they have to take an assessment test on dog behavior and like the rules and stuff to be over there. Because I'm bouncing back and forth, but kids that aren't able to be over there, I have to be over here doing assignments and teaching them. I can't just leave them unattended either. I have a para that helps, but like if she's needed somewhere else, then like I'm bouncing between doggy daycare, kennel room, and my classroom. So they have to be able to be in there. This is one of the tests where I don't have like there's not accommodations for this one. It's kind of like our NOCD is very limited. Our NAFTA exam, which is the National American Veterinary Technician Association. So that's like one of our certifications. There's no accommodations for that one. This test is similar to that. And I explain it to them. It's if you can't be over there without the accommodations, you have to get a 75% on the test, which they could miss quite a few and still get that to be over there. I have one girl in my afternoon. I gave her, she has in her IEP that she has to have like a study guide completed. I really wanted everybody to have the opportunity to be over there. There's other stipulations like attendance and things like that, but like passing this test is one of them. So every single form of any type of material I could give to her or anybody else, I gave to everybody. I had like a folder. I had flow charts, I had diagrams, I had presentations, videos, anything I could that would help them. She got a 38%. So I put it as incomplete. I didn't want it to affect her grade in the class because the first part of it, I have them take it 1 week, and then anybody that was absent or fails, we're doing it again on Wednesday. So they get to redo it if they failed or didn't get a 75. Another opportunity. I went through it with each student that failed and I said, here's the areas where you really struggled on. Hers were clearly a lot, but I just gave her 2 areas out of there that I think she would have been good if she tried a little harder on those. So she came up to me today and gave me a stack of flashcards and said, I've been making these for the daycare test. Okay. I did make a Kahoot. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Okay. So I made that. It's not a great representation because it is a handwritten test. It's not multiple choice because we need them to know the answers, not just pick an answer. But the Kahoot is multiple choice. So her flashcards, it said one of them was, what is appeasement behavior? Like, what is an example of appeasement behavior? And it's like jumping up or licking, things like that. She put on the back all of the above, which was the answer on the Kahoot. And then I kept going through the cards and they were all like that. I know this was really long, but I had to give you the whole background. How do I express to her? I did tell her that she needs to put actual examples, but like, these are the kinds of things I deal with when she talks to me, but I don't know how to fix it when it comes to studying. I wish I was joking, but I did give her the flashcards back, so I can't prove it.
So I think we need to guide her to a groomer and not necessarily to a vet tech school.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that'd be good.
Michael, you are not alone. No,
I thought it was a joke. When she handed him to me, I looked down. I thought it was a joke.
so
It was not.
did you perhaps correct a few for her and model that correction a little bit?
Yeah,
Maybe
I
she
told
can
her,
pick the
I
ball up
showed her
and run.
what they should, but it was like it was a stat. She was like, "Did you read all of them? Are they correct?" I said, "No, they're not. They all say all of the above. Like, that's how Kahoots are. Like, truth,
I'm aware.
I
Yeah.
should have." And she's one where her IEP is, you make her a study guide and you have to give her all the answers for everything, which I do. I make an answer key for one of my morning kids and one of my afternoons. So I just print it out and I give it to her. She did get 100% on her open book quiz last Friday. But when
Again,
it's not open book, I'm just not really sure.
well, correct, because when it so going back to a couple names I put out there. Uh, looking at this quickly if I had it. So there's a book called Integrating Differentiated Instruction with Understanding by Design, and it's chapter 8 called Grading and Reporting. Let me give you this in a nutshell. The only thing that's accurate in terms of do they know it or not is your summative assessment. That summative assessment can be paper pencil, it can be on the computer, it can be performance. But that's the only thing that is a measurement. Now, we throw other things in there because they're kids. For example, maybe you have some type of participation, okay? Maybe you have some type of homework points. But if if you don't weight summative assessment over those, you're skewing achievement. And I look at these examples of they're getting study guides, they're getting open book, open note tests. Those aren't strategies to measure achievement. Those are strategies to get an arbitrary 60% or more on a test and pass the class. So again, I would talk to the case manager, all right? I would talk to the parent and say, really appreciate your child trying to come up with their own study strategies, but I just want to make you aware that she didn't structure this right. We did a couple together, and look, put them on the clock too. Like, can you help them a little bit? I don't, a parent is a noun, parent is a verb. So they've got to parent, right? So let's give them and I really believe that the school and the family has to have some type of connection. Now, hopefully, it's not a dysfunctional connection, but you know, you're never going to go wrong when you reach out to the parent. I'm not going to say it's going to be a pleasant experience, but more often than not, how many of your students, their parents were at your school as students? It tends to be a little bit generational, the support of the trades. They like that school. They like their kid at that school. They want their child to succeed. And again, I'm going to go back to Heather because I think she's another one who said something about lower than a 70% retake the test. You know, for the best of intentions, we're doing the worst of things. I lost track. There were a couple other hands up or whatnot. And you're all coming up on talking to your administrator as an assignment. Blame me. Hey, this professor from out in the West here, I got to have a conversation with you about differentiated instruction. And I would incorporate some of your own scenarios in there. What do I do? What would you do? You're the instructional leader here. They should have some ideas or background. I mean, I know a lot of these guys and gals, you know, they've got lots and lots of experience. So what's interesting this week is we're previewing, okay? What are the administrative expectations in regard to meeting the SDI? And so we've articulated some war stories. I would encourage you to pick a school, any school, or that you may have questions about. Remember that Penn Data site I showed you last week, right? We have an epidemic of identification in the state of Pennsylvania. And I've said this I've had an opportunity to say this to the secretary. I think she's an extremely competent individual, Carrie Rowe. She's actually from close to where I'm sitting. She was the superintendent in Beaver, Pennsylvania. But she's extremely. Now I'm not going to say I always agree with her, but we've had some very robust conversations, she and I, because nobody really cares, right, what Lenrich has to say, but I say it anyway. And you know, I don't think we always do what's best. And one of the things I brought up to her was the difference in identification, state to state, with the same law. You cannot tell me that one of every 5 students in the state of Pennsylvania has an identified disability. Do they need support? Sure. I'm tired of hearing about COVID. That was 20 and 21. If we haven't gotten them over a COVID hump by now, they're never going to get over the COVID. So let's bag that stuff. All right. They've been in front of us now for 4 going on 5 years. I think we've had our COVID remediation. So why are we spoon feeding these kids? And again, in the end, it's not because I'm going to swear a little bit. It's not because I'm some type of hard ass. I want these kids to succeed outside of my 4 walls. I'm already giving them breakfast. I'm already giving them lunch. I'm already giving them people that care about them and love them. The world's not going to do that. Going to eat them up. The last thing I want is for Heather's kids to think that they're doing great because they got 90% or 100. I don't know how you get lower than 100 if you're looking up the answers, But now all of a sudden they go in the world, and someone asks them to do something and they want to redo it. Why I didn't get it right the first time? Do you think I could do it the second? No. I know we've got some machine tool people in here. My son's 29. One of his buddies a few years ago was working in a machine shop, and his calculations were off. So he generated 48 pieces of whatever he was doing that were wrong. How do you think the company reacted to that? Well, he's now a tattoo artist. So, it is they've got to have the knowledge and skills. We need to differentiate, and there's a lot of ways. The example I give, since I'm sitting here right off of 79, is I said there's all kind of ways to get to Erie. You can go to 79, you can go up Route 19, a lot of ways to get there. The goal is to get them to Erie, right? The goal is to get them to proficiency. There's different ways we can get there. The goal's not to give them goals they have to bend down to reach. Now, some of these students, they are struggling learners, legit, and you're going to have, remember, 85, 10, 5, right? You're going to have a small percentage that maybe just can't do what everybody else does. But I'm going to go to Brittany's example, and not everybody needs to be a vet tech. There are a parameter of roles within the animal healthcare industry that are needed. you've got to have a job that fits that knowledge and skill set. So Merle, keep up the fight, right? Don't give in. You're doing it because you care, not because you don't. We're coming up here with about 5 minutes or less to go. So here's the last thing too, relative to your administrative conversation. What do you feel my strengths are as an instructor in regards to differentiation, and where do I need to grow? How well does your administration know you? Now, I would hope that beyond any type of evaluation or observation, that you get drop-ins. Just checking in just to say hello, see how you're doing. Let me tell you something as an administrator. My ass. I'm coming in your classroom and walking past I want to know you as an educator. Like when I come into your class, what are the rituals and routines that I see every time? They're like clockwork. You can't fake that. But also, if you don't have the rituals and routines, you can't fake that just when I walk in. And you know who's going to rat you out? The kids. Go ahead, Starnetta. I can't hear her. Can anyone else hear her? She unmuted. Your mic must not be working, Starnetta. Sounds like she's got something to say too. Sorry, Starnet, for whatever reason your mic's not working. But as an administrator, now not so much as a director, it's more the responsibility of the building principal. But I need to know what those rituals and routines are going to look like. I need to know your instructional style. And also then, when we talk about your instruction, I know you. I know what we're talking about. I know the kids that we're talking about. So I'm looking forward to hearing. It seems like my prediction here, as far as these, there's 2, 4, there's 6 questions there, that questions 5 and 6 are going to be interesting. Heather, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to clarify. So is this interview for next week? And this week is the lesson plan? Because it still shows that on assignments. Okay.
Yeah, this week, I'm the next 2 weeks. This week is the lesson plan. Then next week is the administrator. I got some questions about 4 and 5 today. So I'm kind of.
And on the assignment, it still says like we send a draft in for module 4, and then next week we send in the final draft for this 4.
Yeah, double check that the syllabus is right on the assignment thing. I did make some updates. I'll double check that again as well. When Point Park put it in, I thought when I updated the syllabus, they would update the assignment as well, but they did not. So we'll review your lesson plans next week. Then the following week, you do this. I may have gotten a bit ahead of myself. Michael, all this information has been really helpful. I have dealt with a small bit of this and now better informed how to handle any issues and what can be done, hopefully, to keep the situation from growing a bigger problem. I hope so. Sorry, I deviated a little off of that accommodations lesson plan, but our conversations have been pretty robust. And also in your reflection for 3 and in your case study for 1, this class has done a good job identifying strategies. You're welcome. So I'm looking forward to the lesson plan. And then so we've gone from the student, right, identifying the student. Now we're getting to the lesson plan, and then we're getting to really some type of evaluation or observation about your instruction. So 4:59 here, anything for the good of the group? I kind of have a rough outline of these days, but let the conversation kind of go organically. I hope you, like Michael, find these beneficial. I look forward to them. I like hearing from you each and every week. Stay in there. It's worth it. It's worth doing the right thing. These kids deserve it. Have a great week.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.